going to say the frustration in your voice, Phil, because you've seen this so many times. The final line of the Super League RFL statement today says a discussion around the longer term consequences and the future of the Wolfpack in Super League will commence shortly. That word consequences is a very interesting choice. And
I think that word's used deliberately in the same way sanction was used against Leeds not going to Catalan. I think that is, we are not going to have a club tell us what they will and won't do. We're a governing body that will tell them what they will and won't do. So I think that's worded in shock and disbelief more than anything. I just think now is the time. We've all said it over the last few weeks when we've been doing podcasts. The world will change. The sporting world will change. Some clubs will be worse affected than others, but the sport now needs to sit down, if it hasn't already, and decide what it wants to be, what it wants to look like. A week ago, we were having Phil Gould telling us how great it was that the Super League had a toe in the North American market. Today, that toe got cut off. We need to decide as a sport whether it includes people like the NRL, whether it includes other investors that David Argyle may have been able to bring to the party. What do we want? How do we want to make that sport look in 5 years? How do we go back to Sky, having lost this golden opportunity? The amount of good work that they got out of Sunnyville being part of it, being able to focus on Toronto when the season opened, the story that Rugby League was this progressive, forward-looking sport. All of that has gone. Now, do we want to get that back? Why would we want to get that back? How do we make sure that if we do get that back, or there's somebody else coming into interview who might want to take on that mantle, be that Ottawa, Newcastle, whoever, what assurances will they have in the future? This is a sport that genuinely does want to be living up to the words that it says, but without actually the material advantage that goes with it. I don't know. I think we've had so many opportunities. This could be the last one, and it could be a catastrophic blow for the sport.
Yeah, I think it's fine to concentrate on your core audience and your traditional heartlands, as long as you're honest about it. And I think that's something Phil touched on earlier. I think a lot of this will come down to, these extraordinary times. People will look at the balance sheets and thinking more about away supporters and, the amount of people watching on Sky TV in England. Yeah, Toronto gets 10,000 fans that, we wouldn't get elsewhere, but they don't get as many Sky subscribers. And I suppose if you're going to Sky right now, you are trying to bring as many subscribers from England as you can possibly offer. I think ultimately it'll probably come down to those sort of things, and the way that business will contract and become more desperate and become more, I guess, looking at the more tangible things, such as people coming through turnstiles when that's allowed again, and people buying pies and drinks, and I think there will be a more focus on that. I mean, even in pre-COVID, you still got the obsession by many CEOs and officials at clubs of, well, how many away fans are they going to bring? That was always the thing that you would hear, and you'd heard that from fans as well. And I think there'll be more emphasis on that now, given where we are and given where all our individual businesses are.
We joke about Leeds in crisis, but Toronto actually are in a real crisis here. And Phil, perhaps suggesting the sport is, John. I look at Australia and I have no emotional attachment to anything. So I know when clubs have merged, it just seems to happen. Obviously, I'm sure the fans hate it. And, we've tried it over here and it never got off the first page. The mergers we did have were shams. The Huddersfield, Sheffield and the Gateshead Hull mergers were just there to keep afloat one of those two clubs. I'm not going to suggest mergers, but do we need to have a real discussion now? And this might be unpalatable to many, but it might be the only way forward. That we've got to acknowledge that there are clubs outside Super League who are never going to be Super League clubs for whatever reason. Dual Reg is it in a nutshell. Should we really now have a system of feeder clubs which strengthens those clubs outside Super League and the clubs inside the competition as well?
Yeah, I think so. I think there was obviously that opportunity in the mid-90s that went and the sort of status quo has been maintained, and we've probably, well, I wouldn't say we've got less money in the game, but there's 37 professional clubs and there's not really enough fans or money to go around to sustain that. And if you think, there was maybe half that, there'd be a lot stronger level of competition, which would then help the national team, you would think. Because I think, as I mentioned on last week's show, there's players in League One who are on a lot more money than players in Super League, and that's not really how it should work as a business model. So yeah, I do think we need a serious debate, a discussion about that, but I don't think it will happen because that would require serious, strong leadership and accountability, and we don't generally see that. And we haven't learned from our mistakes in the past, as we've already mentioned. And that is that old sort of saying, isn't it, that if you don't learn from history, you're doomed to repeat it.
I think
sorry, Paul.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think a problem we have was something I think I mentioned last time I was on here, that of the Championship being such a complex league in terms of there's a division within the Championship of what those clubs feel that they are about, and in terms on the lines of ambitions, you've got a handful of clubs there who genuinely feel like they should be in Super League or could be in Super League and want to be in Super League, and then you have another half who actually, that's not really on their radar. They're just businesses who accept what they are, whatever their fans might think. And that's a problem that we have and are going to have to solve if you address that situation that you mentioned, Richard. I don't think we're going to do that. I think we've had that debate. We had licensing, which seems to be what you were proposing there. It seemed like a good idea at the time, but many other people were never sold on it. The criticism is always, it wasn't done well, which is true, but also many people were opposed anyway. So I don't see us going down that route anytime soon. People are so tired of debates about structure and the formats of the divisions. I don't know. Maybe it will come back. Maybe it's rugby league, isn't it? # Pete Rugby League. That's what we do, right? Talk about structures and how we should formulate the leagues and whether we should have relegation or not, rather than actually what happens on the pitch. I don't know, mate. I don't know what the solution is there, but yeah, I think you're absolutely right. There are many clubs in the Championship who would suit a sort of feeder status. But will they accept that as clubs? Will they accept that as supporter bases? Is the only thing that keeps them going the fact that the dream is alive? Or if the dream wasn't alive, would it still be an important community asset that people supported? I don't know. People have different views on that, I think.
I think it's also about identity. Whether we like it or not, in the professional era of sport, the only sports that are going to command huge amounts of money, which is based on eyeballs, are global sports. So football is number one, probably Formula One is number two, basketball is number three. And at the moment, they are the only three. I think outside of that, you've got sports like the AFL that, is happy in the geographical area it plays in. You've got sports like rugby union that aren't as developed as a global sport as they would like us to think that they are. And we need to decide what we want to be. If we want to join that division of globally viewed sports, we need to make some decisions that will change the way the sport has been traditionally run and looked over 125 years. If we're not, and there's nothing wrong with being the best we can be in two parts of the world, one of which will be always a full-time sport, the other will be a mix of full-time and part-time, then we have to accept that we won't be commanding the kind of monies that Sky have been spending on sports such as ours. We will revert to being more of a speedway. We will be limited in the power of sponsorship that we can access and the number of external investors that will perhaps want to put money into our sport. And therefore our profile will diminish. Our players will be part-time predominantly. They will still be a rugby league. It won't die. It's too ingrained in too many places. It still is a great watch, but we have an identity crisis. We don't know what we want to be. We want the riches that go with being deemed to be global, which is what Toronto gave us. We want the intimacy and control of being 30 clubs within a 80-mile radius. You cannot be both. Unfortunately, the world has moved on, whether we like it or not. What sustained our clubs in terms of industry and all the other social networks that go with it are no longer there. And we've put off this debate for too long. We can either be Scottish football with two really big clubs and a lot of ones who do good work in small towns and villages, but will never match the Celtic and the Rangers, or we can try and break new markets, but we can't be both.